And I will call to order the regular meeting of the Plan and Design Commission of the City of Highland Park at 7 o'clock on September 3rd, 2024. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Nannis.
Here.
Commissioner Henry.
Here.
Commissioner Arnold. Commissioner Mantis.
Present.
Commissioner Hecht.
Here.
Vice Chair Kirsch.
Present.
Chair Moore.
Present.
We have a quorum, Madam Chairman, and I do recognize Corporation Counsel Martinez. And Corporation Counsel, if you could introduce your colleague.
Sure. Hannah Saed.
Nice to meet you. Council member liaison Littler will not be present this evening. Thank you.
Okay. And then we also have our student commissioner with us as well.
Oh, I apologize. Student commissioner as well, and Alex Mendoza's student commissioner. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. First thing is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting, which was August 20th of 2024. Can I please get a motion?
Motion to approve.
Can I get a second? Okay. Motion by Commissioner Nanos, seconded by Commissioner Hecht. Do we have any discussion about these minutes? Alrighty. Well, I wasn't here either. So can we take a voice vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? That would be the two of us. Yeah. All right, so I believe those minutes pass. All right, the next item on our agenda is our scheduled business for today, which is public hearing 2024 ZTA-006 for a zoning text amendment. Shall I read the?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is for the 2024 ZTA-006 for a zoning text amendment to modify, strike, or create definitions and regulations regarding berms, buffering and buffers, setbacks, required yards, and allowed encroachments, landscaping requirements, and related requirements. So let me read the opening statement. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Highland Park Plan and Design Commission. My name is Karen Moore. A quorum of the Plan and Design Commission being present, the members of the Plan and Design Commission will now introduce themselves for the record from my right.
Josh Nannis.
Adam Hecht.
Steve Kirch.
Danny Mantis.
Ken Henry.
The Plan and Design Commission is charged with hearing applications for rezonings, plan developments, and subdivisions under the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations of the City of Highland Park. In all matters, we recommend to the City Council based upon the testimony presented to us in the hearing. We are required to decide cases within 45 days after receipt of the transcript. All testimony is under oath. Both applicants and others who wish to speak on a particular case should present specific evidence as to why a proposal meets or fails to meet the standards for the relief requested. For clarity of our record, only one person at a time will speak, and all questions will be directed through the chair. We ask that you make every effort to not be repetitive in your testimony. Finally, we will make every effort to adhere to the schedule prepared. For tonight's hearing, if additional time is needed on a matter, it will be continued until the next available agenda. With that, I open the floor for the staff of the Plan and Design Commission to read into the record proof of publication and ownership.
Proof of publication and ownership are available for viewing at the offices of Community Development, 1150 Half Day Road in Highland Park. Thank you.
All righty. Mr. Burhop, do we have a presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Good evening. I'm Carl Burhop. I'm a senior planner with the City of Highland Park, 1150 Half Day Road, Highland Park, Illinois. So this is just a very brief presentation. So this is a zoning code text amendment proposal. This would be a change to the zoning code. Staff recommend the commission consider amending the zoning code to require berms and additional use limitations within required yards in particular areas. that particular areas was defined further in the report. There was an exhibit in the report that gave those locations. So it's those sensitive areas that were previously identified with a prior text amendment within the B and I3 zoning districts that are proximate to residential neighborhoods. So it's those areas that are zoned I or B3 that are either to the west of the railroad or to the east of Highway 41. And some of those properties abut or are across from residential neighborhoods. At this public hearing, staff requests consideration and feedback from the commission, and if appropriate, direction to draft findings of fact and an ordinance capturing the proposed changes. And then staff would request a continuance to the October 1st meeting in order to follow up on any comments. And of course, the commission should also take public comment, if any. Berms. Berms can be very effective buffers. Yes, perhaps you know a few. There were some photos in the packet. In the packet, there were photos of berms. One of them was from this Google image that's from the Highland Park Hospital. The other one, this is near our city offices on Half Day Road. That is city facilities behind that. That I took this photo. I'm just standing on the sidewalk. And so, yeah, berms are just essentially that, just earthen little miniature hills with landscaping, grass or shrubs, trees, and other plantings on top. But of course, the plantings on top is, of course, more effective. The landscaping code has certain minimum install heights. Well, when you're putting it on top of a berm, it's all that more effective. So that is recommendation number one, that the commission consider requiring berms. Remember, all of these recommendations are for those specific properties that were identified, or not, excuse me, specific, those areas that were identified in the code, or in the report rather, forgive me. So to require berms in those areas, essentially to screen the uses and structures on those areas from residential uses, that the commission consider a height requirement of somewhere between 5 to 8 feet in height with at least 2 plant units, and I'll explain that per 100 linear feet. And then staff requests feedback on these requirements. So for plant units, staff researched this and found the village of Bannockburn had berm requirements, and then what they call these plant units. So when I first read that, I thought 2 plants for 100 feet, that's not much. Well, no, that's not what it means actually. If you look at it closer, so a plant unit is a combination of plants. And this is Bannockburn's table, and you can see they have an A, a B, a C, and a D. And so each one of those represents a plant unit. And staff would put forth, as Bannockburn requires, that 2 of those, a combination that an applicant can choose, but 2 of those should be required. And just to give you an approximate idea of what that could be, I looked at just what A and B would be combined. Well, it adds up to 30 plant units. So that's basically 1 plant every 3 feet. And I will just draw attention to the fact that berms can be tricky for plants. Berms have to retain water. There has to be space for the plant to grow out and grow up, obviously. And then number 2 gets to limiting the uses allowed to encroach within required yards, except obviously where a yard abuts a non-residential use. And so these are the required yards for the I and B3 zoning districts. Both have a 25-foot front yard requirement, 20-foot side yard, and a 20-foot rear yard. I believe those are the requirements if they, for the side and the rear if they abut residential. It may not be the same if they're non-residential, but that would not be a consideration. The consideration is when it abuts or is across from residential. So the idea would be that those required yards, there's certain encroachments that are allowed. And what this is looking at really limiting that. So for instance, exterior lighting and light poles can encroach within required front yards. Now they have to meet the city's Article 6 exterior lighting requirements, foot candles, etc. But this is again is kind of an extra step, so to speak, to limit that, to limit those encroachments. And so the idea would be no off-street parking, accessory buildings or structures, exterior lighting, trash or refuse containers, other storage or enclosures or uses be allowed in those setbacks if they abut or are across from a residential district. And then obviously there has to be some allowed encroachments, berms, landscaping, buffering, ornamental or decorative accessory structures. And then of course properties will have gates, fences, and of course they have to have access to their facilities. That's the presentation. I can take questions if any.
Do we have any questions? Go ahead.
So am I looking at the map correctly? It's only the hatched areas that we're talking about?
That's right. Those should be the properties, actually. It's a big map, so I divided it into two, and it still might be hard to see. But it's the hashed properties that are zoned B3 or I, and they are to the east of Highway 41 or to the west of the railroad that runs up and down the Highway 41 corridor. Those would be the areas that would be impacted. These were the same areas that there was an amendment to the PUD triggers back in, I believe, December. These are those same
So
areas.
just those three specific areas,
And then you've got an area there, maybe?
four
So,
specific.
yeah, this is striped.
that one,
This
and that
is
one.
striped.
Okay, so 4 areas.
This is striped. Yeah, I think 4 areas is accurate.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, and are we talking about allowing berms in front yards? Is that what you're saying?
Well, this is saying to require them for development of these areas, to require them to be between 5 to 8 feet in height with the landscaping required on it as well. To provide that extra screening and buffering to those residential neighborhoods.
That about, yep.
Okay, so just in terms of my feedback, I'll call attention to the design code section 176.205A2, which says buildings shall be oriented so that the principal entry is visible and accessible from the primary street frontage. I would hate to see any amendment to the berm and landscaping code that would conflict with that, and I'm not sure the wording here isn't conflicting.
Well, I think in this case, so for example, on that, the area on the top, the areas of the business district that abut the residential area are on the north side and the east side of the property. So that's the area where the berms would have to go. They wouldn't go on the front of those properties because the front isn't abutting the residential area.
There would also be access. So you'd have to have an access drive, so you could see up the access drive.
Well, I just, the way
I'd take a look at that.
I've made this comment many a time on several other projects before, but I don't like hiding things. I don't think that's really good urban design or suburban design. The hospital is a good example, though, of where those berms work very well, and they do not at all encroach on the main entrance of that. It'd be hard to hide the hospital anyway, but the main entrance down that parkway does exactly what the design code asks of it, and it presents that streetscape transition and the building facing the street that it's on. The berms shield the parking, basically, in that case, which I think is fine, but I think this may be a little, I know that it's very few districts, but it seems overly broad to me, and I don't know, that's my 2 cents.
Okay. You can go.
At least the shaded part here, it looks like we're singling out the car dealers. Because isn't all of that car dealers? Or most of it?
These properties?
No.
No, because there's Buc-ee's is there on that corner.
Yeah, but you've got
There is a car dealer, yeah.
You've got the exchange, then you go, yes, you get to, there's a few other things there, but there's a lot of car dealers there too.
So Carl, could you draw us or walk a line around the area on this particular drawing where in those two areas where the B1 or the I is abutting the residential, so we can see where the berms would go. Because the berms are not going to go along the Highway 41 side.
Right.
They're going to go,
For these properties owned highway commercial, it would be this property's north property line because that abuts a residential district. And then it would be these properties' rear property lines. And then for this property here, which I believe is a gas station, it would be again the north and then the east property lines that abut homes.
yes,
So this staff is now proposing this requirement be required along the street frontages or along those property lines that abut each other. The proposal is for those property lines that abut the neighborhood, the residential.
exactly. And then can you show us on the lower triangle the same
Yeah,
areas?
so this parcel would be along the west, and then it would be along the south too, even though that does not directly abut. Staff would recommend that it be worded in a way that it also include if it's across from a street.
Right, it's
or a
across the
is-
street.
Right, so it'd be for the south and the west, but not the east along the railroad.
Right,
And then here, this property here, to the north and to the west, those are across or abutting single-family homes. And then for this property all the way on the south, it would be along Ridge Road, because that's across from single-family, and then the south property line there.
thank you. Did you have any more questions? Okay.
No, I just was one outside, dude, it's quick. Is anybody, like, are we getting complaints about being unsightly in these areas from the homeowners, or like what precipitated this?
There's general concern in these areas about the abutting uses that are not consistent with residential.
I
From
think
every
it-
hearing that we've had.
Right, as we've talked about,
It's not because, it's not that people are calling and saying, hey, you know, I really liked it.
No, I mean,
Right.
this would only affect new development. It wouldn't
I
make
understand
anyone
that.
do anything if they
Right.
weren't doing anything, yeah.
but I think the fact that we've had new developments presented to us in these, and those are the area, that's a discussion area that has come up from the general population, that maybe we need to watch out for those things. So I think we're trying to get ahead of any particular issues. So my understanding here does sound like that a property is allowed to have an access drive through the required side yard. That's okay?
That's right, this would allow for an access drive.
Okay, so we don't require that the access drive be within, or not be in the setback, be on the actual.
There's no current requirement in the code that the access drive, an access drive can be in the front or side yard by the current code.
Okay. Commissioner Nunes.
Question, in the packet, it talks about the height requirement of the berms. Is there a width requirement to go with it, or is it?
No, there wasn't, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah,
John.
not particularly, just what's needed to.
Is there like a slope requirement? I mean, if you made something 8 feet tall on a really narrow piece of land, it's all just gonna erode.
There isn't one here.
Okay.
And then additionally, is there a setback requirement for the berms from the edge of the property?
None
Or
that's,
just it has to fall within whatever the setback requirement is?
none that's proposed by staff. Of course, we are here to get feedback from the commission, but the way this is proposed by staff, the berm would be required within that required setback. Somewhere, again, depending on feedback from the commission, 5 to 8 feet in height.
Would it impact the amount of usable space for a developer to redevelop the property, or would it shrink it?
Definitely uses land, yeah. I mean, you can't, yeah, you wouldn't be able to use it, but for
you
landscaping,
can't
just
put
like
anything there
landscaping
anyway.
buffers do right now.
It's within the setback, though.
Yeah.
Right,
you can't
that's
build there
correct. So
anyway.
there's already limitations in the setback and
So
this is
if it's
proposing.
within, there's setback requirements, and this would fit within the setback requirements, so it wouldn't impact the amount of usable space, or potentially would a little bit? I'm just trying to.
There's two proposals here. One would affect the amount of usable space. The other one is a berm within setbacks. So
Sorry.
two things. So yeah, it would affect the amount of usable space.
But they can't put anything in the in the setback area anyway, in the,
Well, this would say that you can't put anything in the setback areas.
Right.
Most things are principal buildings and things like that
Right.
have setback limitations. This would say you just need to leave that open,
right,
except for berms, landscaping, things
right,
like that.
right.
Yep. And if you take a look at the hospital berm picture, Carl, I mean, you could just take a look here. So there's a berm that the hospital did. I mean, when you go drive around the hospital, you could see some real good examples. When you go in the parking lot, if you park in the back, you could see the way it looks from the other side as well and how it kind of buffers that neighborhood. Those are smaller. I mean, they're not quite as high as a 5 to 8. They might be 5 at some point, but you'd have to look yourself. They're not quite as high. A larger one would be the one that's outside the Public Services Center. And Carl, I think you have a picture there. This is the one on Half Day Road, which is our Public Services Center of the city. And so that gives you an idea of a higher one, more at that height of 5 to 8 feet there. That's what that is.
And the one in the hospital is 1, 3.
Yeah, that's probably more like a 3 or 4. I mean, I think it varies, but yeah, that's more like a 3, probably 3, 4.
Well, and I think it's partly because the parking lot seems like it's sunk down a little bit. It's lower.
I mean, there was no explicit, number, right? We're looking at, for these sensitive properties only, what might we want to require in terms of that? Now, Bannockburn has a more broad, they have differing requirements depending on their districts as well. This is the most intense districts that we have that we're looking at that for.
So when we talk about the height of the berm, it's meant to shield the property from, did I read it right, the person who's standing on the sidewalk?
Well, that's right.
Because it seems to me that the height of the berm is going to be dependent on the height of the person and where the sidewalk is.
The property line.
The idea is that with the berm, up to 8 feet in height with the landscaping on top of it, that somebody standing at the property line would not be able to see the structures or use on the subject property.
Okay, so that should help us. I mean, there's some math that can go in there to figure out if an average person is, 5'8", and then they're standing on the property line, and if the berm is depending on where you put the berm, the height of the berm can be varied to provide that screening. It's like when we talk about those setback 5th floors in a downtown area and the person stands on the street and looks up and at the certain angle, they can't see the 5th floor. And I assume that there's some math that can be done here to figure that out. So that's why I would not be comfortable giving a set distance, like 6 feet, that the height should be only 6 feet. Do we have any other feedback to give?
So would you say, Chair, if I may ask a question?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, after you.
I'm only looking this way, apparently.
A couple questions. First of all, would this proposal have affected that car dealership that we had a number of hearings ago, and their development of the back of that area? Would this berm amendment would impact that neighborhood that is residential behind that area?
Not on that redevelopment because they weren't actually changing that area. But yes, that project would be pre-existing non-conforming with regard to this particular aspect of it. But if it was to be built new, yeah, there would have been a berm requirement in the back.
Got it. And I also,
And you recall that development already had a sizable vegetated area on a large part of it that we didn't want to touch. So that's another thing. We wouldn't want to see this take that area down to create a berm.
well, I think that, we're kind of getting into the weeds, so to speak.
Only trees and shrubs, please.
And invasive non-resident species.
Yes.
But when we talk height, to the chair's comments, arguably, and I suppose this is what we're going for, perhaps, even if you say it's 4 feet or 6 feet, the vegetation on top of it is going to make that significantly different. And to Commissioner Kirsch's comments, there seems to me to be a balancing between making these areas attractive to residents and not feel, that residential areas feel that it's imposed on them, but also being able to find these places. So, for example, I go by the building on Half Day Road literally every day, probably several times a day. And I remember when they built that berm, it wasn't that long ago, actually. And it really changed the feel of the area and frankly made it a little bit tougher to find the parking lot to get into the Public Works parking lot. So I kind of have ambivalent views about it.
Yes,
Certainly in the
please.
case of the hospital, I mean, they have a really good signage program. In the
Yeah.
case of Public Works, that's our service area. That's not it's not really meant for access.
Well,
for
people go there for
customers.
permits all the time.
No, yeah, but not that one. There's two
I
different
know,
parts
there's
of our lot.
basically the garage and there's the building.
Well, no, there's the building with the
Yeah.
garage, but then the area with the berm is in front of, that's actually the police shooting center and
Right.
the salt dome
Right,
and the
right, right.
fire training facility. We don't encourage a lot of people to go into that facility.
Right. Although that is
Except
where
for
the
recycling.
recycling, that is
Correct.
recycling.
And then we have the sign that we put out, yes, for recycling. Yep, the recycling.
Well, and
center.
it's hiding the fueling area that's there.
And the
now.
fueling area
The
as
new
well,
fueling
right.
area.
And that's just a city refueling area, right. So in that case, we're not as concerned about that, but I understand what you're saying. And in the hospital's case, they've done a good job at signing appropriate entrances and stuff like that, which that would be needed, yeah.
But, and I also think that any of these berms would have to, if there was a driveway there, they still have to follow the rules that they have to make sure they still follow the site triangles
That's
requirements. So they can't get pushed up too close to the driveways.
Yep.
Commissioner Mantis.
Thank you. So I guess my question is, I think the relationship between industrial zoning and residential zoning is probably one of the most consequential to get right. And as I'm looking at it, I think, would I be correct in saying that any type of B zoning would accommodate for residential development at some point, meaning an apartment building or a mixed-use property?
I don't believe so. I'll double check that right now.
B3.
Yeah, the highway commercial. I'll double check that. I don't believe so, but I'll double check it right now.
And I doesn't allow it.
No.
So like, I'm just looking at the map as an example, B4, BG, that would not be,
But that's not what we're talking about.
no, I know that, but I guess my question is there opportunity to expand this where future residential developments could exist so that we're being proactive in what we're trying to protect against rather than reactive?
Well, if there was a residential zoning district, then this would not apply to that. Because it's residential.
No, I understand that. That's a residential district, but my point is you can build residential in a B zoning district, can you not?
So in the I district, there are no residential uses allowed. In the B3, no multifamily is allowed. No.
So you can't, in the two zones we're talking about, we can't. That's what I'm trying to say. The BG zones are different, but these is just the B3 and I.
I mean, but that's my point, is there are an I and a B4, BG zone that abut, and again, in terms of like making sure that you get it right the first time, wouldn't it be best to put berms or, to the extent that we're going to talk about putting berms, put those everywhere where there are two different zoning districts that are abutting in case one of those could allow for residential uses one day?
I think more the issue is, would we add the other B districts? Would we add this to the other B districts?
Staff looked at Bannockburn. If staff could follow up if the commission is interested in that.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any more questions for staff? Does anybody from the public have any questions or wish to say something? Please come up to the podium. And then we give each member of the public 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name, and then I'll swear you in.
The name is Rick Heineman, and I reside at 1449 Glencoe Avenue. I just gave my card so we can get that.
Okay, and then do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, well, Ken brought up the point about where the Acura dealership is, north and south, but you also have the Mueller development that's potential, or I'm not sure where it is in the approval process for the car repair place. So you should probably put in the record a discussion about that property specifically as well, since it's either soon to be developed or whatever. Secondarily to that, I'm very focused on TIF districts because I represent the District 113 for the TIF district, and all the southern part of this stuff is in the TIF district. So we're talking the area that's north of Deerfield Road is in the TIF district. Yes, if that's redeveloped, fine, put a berm in, good idea. In terms of the southern part, we're talking about the Solar Cup factory area. And if, as we know, and you have heard, there's been significant objection to the development of that site as a warehouse or some other large industrial facility. If something changed where we wanted to go with residential there, if the public thought that might be a better solution, as, for example, I might, then I assume that as part of the rezoning of that to residential and the fact that it would be a planned unit development, that this type of requirement could be included there. So this shouldn't be a problem in terms, so it'd be good if it's developed as a commercial, but it doesn't really matter if it's changed to residential because it would be, what would happen would be based on what occurred during that development proposal. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I just be clear.
Yes,
So B3 and I zoning districts do not allow any residential of any form.
Right.
At all. That's all this applies to. So if a residential development was proposed at any of these sites that are on this map, the quote sensitive areas that we've established through other amendments from last year, then no, it wouldn't apply because it would be rezoned to residential, and then residential would take hold, and that would be needing to meet the code for residential
has its
as it
own set of
normally
codes.
does. Correct. So I just want to just be clear about that. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, please come up and state your name and spell your last name for a minute taker.
Sure. John Center, CENTER, 490 Hazel.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
490.
We don't need
I don't think we need addresses anymore.
Social Security or no?
No,
I do. So this is my first.
Oh, wait, I need to.
Sorry. You can finish
right
that.
hand.
Oh, right hand.
Yeah. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So this is my first PDC meeting. I recognize that there's been some dialogue around this now for some time, and that there are a lot of nuances. All I would say is my observation is that if we take a step back from this, my interpretation of the intent here is to help sort of protect the aesthetics of residences that are impacted by unstately large facilities, period. It's going to enhance real estate values. It's going to increase our tax base. Feels like a no-brainer. You guys figure out the details of how to implement it, but I would just encourage the group to think about the big picture here of what it's trying to accomplish and ensure that you kind of get it pushed forward in a productive manner.
Thank you. Did you have something to say, Mr. Fontaine?
no,
Okay.
I was just saying thank you.
So I think what we're trying to do is get this into the code so that when something is presented, we don't have to nitpick and say, well, you need a berm here, you need a berm. We think you need to have a berm over here. It's just already in the code so that we're protecting the residential areas. So we're trying to get that ahead of time so that it's a done deal and we don't have to haggle about it at every potential
Hearing.
presentation that comes to our group. So,
Madam Chair, and you know, I mean, in principle, using, you know, the hospital as an example, I mean, that has its own specific section of code and things like that. And you can see what the city did there many years ago with the berms. And so that's a local example. But then, you know, right next door in Bannockburn and other places have these types of requirements for the uses that, you know, are discontinuous in terms of the types. And it seems to make sense. That's staff respectfully kind of agree with that notion.
thank you. All right, do you have enough information to go on to work on this further, or do we give you enough?
I think we do, and we can come back with the draft findings and a draft ordinance along those lines. And just to be clear, I mean, currently right now through the PUD process, you know, the commission can require berms. So you know, there isn't an inability to do so, but rather that's more of a discretionary process by which you're looking at the particular development in question, judging whether or not a berm is required, okay, as part of a special use permit process. What this does, it says to the commission from the council level, from the code level, saying you need to have a berm, and then the question becomes, well, how are we going to vegetate that berm really, as opposed to whether or not we have it and how tall it is.
Right.
That's
Also,
essentially
yes,
what
yes.
we're doing, because we've required berms before. Like I said,
Right.
we have the hospital, we required berms in other areas as well, inclling some of the areas that.
But this
John
provides
just
us with,
talked about.
how do we do a berm?
Correct, and to what height and what objective. And so this would be a higher objective to create more screening, so that it would be much less visible. Yes.
Okay, can I get a motion to have the planning department come up with findings of fact and a continuance to October 1st?
Yes, please.
So moved.
Motion by Vice Chair Kurtz, do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hecht. Do we do a voice vote, or do you need
Your
to?
voice.
Right? 'Cause
Yeah, because it's not,
Findings
yeah,
of
it's just
A
findings.
voice for the continuation to October 1st.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any nays? No? Okay.
So
All
this
right,
item's been continued to October 1st in this room. Your notice is actual. There'll be no new notice for this meeting, and we'll be here at 7 PM on October 1st to continue this discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, moving on to other business. Is there an administrative design review update?
I do not have one, Chair.
Do not.
Okay. Then in that case, that takes us right to our next meeting, which we just said will be September 17th of 2024. Can you give us a heads up as to what we might be expecting at that meeting?
Yes, Chair. So there were two continued items from the the last meeting in August. That was the storage container, and then I'll call it the truck terminal and related use zoning text amendment. So those two items are coming back because they were continued to that date. And then there is a Plan and Design Commission sign up on the Sherwood Elementary property for changes to that elementary school for design review. It'll be for design review.
Wonderful. Okay, do we have a case briefing?
Madam Chair, I just need a couple of seconds if you just can bear with me. I did have a couple updates to provide. Okay, so a couple of items. Okay. There was the land development amendment for 418 Sheridan Road and 201 St. John's Ravinia Festival. Both that and the related development agreement amendment were voted 5-0 by council to approve. So those were finished at the August 26th meeting, and that's my update on that.
Okay, anything else?
That's it.
We haven't had a lot going on, okay. Do we have any business from the public? Any other business from the public? Seeing none. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any Any nays? This meeting is adjourned. People want to stay. All right, thank you, everybody, for coming.